It's time for Warhammer! In this battle report, the Bretonnians will take on the Wood Elves. This is game number 9 of the Bonepile Miniatures 1000 Points Tournament Series. During this tournament, 6 different armies will face against each other one time during the regular season. And then there will be a double elimination playoffs to determine the ultimate champion. And as you can see, this is game 9. Both teams have played 2 games coming into this one. The Wood Elves have won both games, and the Bretonnians have lost both games. Both teams would like to move up in the league standings, which is determined by total points in the series. Bretonnia is sitting at 1,015 points, and the Wood Elves are at 2,151. Let's have a look at the armies, starting with Bretonnia. You're looking at the army of Bohemond de Bastonne, the Beast Slayer. However, he comes to us in this game only as a low-level paladin. He is mounted on a Bretonnian warhorse and carries a lance. He has the Grail Vow. He also wears heavy armor and carries a shield. He also has a magic item, the Obsidian Trinket, which gives him magic resistance 1. The paladin comes in at 119 points. The paladin rides with another paladin, who is the battle standard bearer. He carries all the same war gear as the general, in addition to the battle standard. But he also has one magic item, a lucky trinket, which gives him 1 free reroll for an armor save or ward save. The battle standard bearer comes in at 139 points. Riding with them is another knight with the Grail Vow, but he is not a character, but he is a musician, and he comes in at 47 points. Next, this army has a unit of 10 peasant bowmen. They carry long bows and have no armor. They also have no command. They cost 50 points. Next, there's a unit of 20 men-at-arms. They have a full command. They carry halberds and wear light armor. They cost 130 points. Next, there's a unit of 12 Knights of the Realm. They wear heavy armor. They carry lances and shields. They have a full command, and they ride Bretonnian war horses. Their unit standard is also a magical standard, the Banner of Eternal Flame, which gives them flaming attacks. This unit is worth 328 points. Next is a unit of 6 questing knights. They have a full command and have great weapons. They also have heavy armor and ride Bretonnian war horses. They come in at 192 points. And then the grand total for the entire Bretonnian army adds up to 1,005 points. And here's the army breakdown. Over to the Wood Elves army. You are looking at the Wood Elves from the Moonshadow Glens. They are led by an elf captain. He has been equipped with a longbow, with arcane bodkins, also light armor. He comes in at 65 points. Next, there's a wizard, a spell singer. He has a hand weapon, no armor, and no shield. But he is a level 2 wizard from the Lore of Life. And in our club, wizards always know the signature spell of their lore, plus additional spells according to their wizard level, which is 2 in this case. And this wizard rolled up spells 1 and 2 from the Lore of Life. So those spells are Faw's Protection and Flesh to Stone, in addition to Earth Blood, the signature spell. And this wizard carries no magic items. He comes in at 120 points. These leaders have brought with them 15 Glade Guard. They have a full command. They carry long bows, but they have no armor or shields. They cost 225 points. Next, there's a unit of 10 Deepwood Scouts. They have no command. They carry longbows and have been upgraded with arcane bodkins. They cost 170 points. There's also a unit of 20 Eternal Guard. They have a full command. They wear light armor and carry shields. Their weapon is a Serath, which is a type of spear stave. They cost 250 points. And finally, there's a unit of 15 Dryads. They have a champion only. They will be skirmishing. They have no hand weapons, and note that they are flammable. They cost 175 points. The grand total for this army adds up to 1,005 points. Maxed out all the way like the Bretonnians. And here's the army breakdown. Let's have a look at the battlefield. This battlefield was set up with our club's random landscape generator that we have put together. Look for a link in the description below that will take you to an explanation of our random landscape generator. And in this case, we rolled up a mountains landscape. And then all the terrain pieces you see here have been selected and placed randomly. First in view, there's a small hill, and then a large rock. Next, there's a wall and a fence. Next, there's an ice patch, followed by a mysterious hill in the middle of the field. Near the hill are two separate forests. And then there are two distinct segments of a river. The closer segment is not mysterious, but the farther one is mysterious. And then there's two more rocks, and then a statue, and none of them have magical effects. And here's a look from the other side. And now on to deployment. The Bretonnians have set up on the side near the ice field. Deployed on the right flank of the formation is the group of Grail Knights. Next to them on the left is the peasant bowman. And then near center is the unit of the Knights of the Realm. And they are in lance formation. Next to them on their left is the unit of men-at-arms. And then on the far left flank is the questing knights. Now let's look at the Wood Elves deployment. Their units are spaced much farther apart. Over on the right flank is the unit of Dryads. And the Wizard Spellsinger is deployed with the Dryads. In the center is the Eternal Guard. And then on the left flank is the Glade Guard. And then the Elf Captain is deployed to the left of them. The Deepwood Scouts are deployed in a forward position, and their deployment allows them to bring an extra forest where they are located. So this concludes the setup of the game. We are ready for turn 1. And the Wood Elves will start the game. All units march forward except for the Deepwood Scouts. They remained in place in the forest. The Dryads moved between the large rock and the mysterious river. And the Eternal Guard moved forward and came in contact with Serpent Rock. And Serpent Rock has a special ability. The first unit with a standard which comes in contact with Serpent Rock will gain +1 initiative for the rest of the game until the banner is destroyed. They also get to choose between poison attacks and immunity to poison. And in this case, the Eternal Guard choose poison attacks. So they will have that ability also until their banner is destroyed. And that's the end of the Wood Elves movement phase and the end of their turn. Bretonnia's first turn of the game. And before they commence this battle, they pay their devotions to the Lady of the Lake. They give honor to her in prayer, in hopes that in return she will protect them during the course of the battle. They promise to be valiant and courageous in return for her favor. And that is all Bretonnia will do for this turn. Back to the Wood Elves. Wood Elves turn 2, and they have no charges to declare, still too far. Remaining moves. All units continue marching forward, except for the Deepwood Scouts in the forward position. And the Wood Elves don't attempt any magic or shooting, so this will be the end of their second turn. Bretonnia turn 2. They are done with their devotions to the Lady of the Lake. Now they begin to move forward into battle, starting with the peasants. The men-at-arms and the peasant bowmen both march forward. And there's no other movement for Bretonnia, and that will end their turn. Wood Elves turn 3. All units continue moving forward, but no marches this time. Over on the right flank, the Dryads have half of their unit moving through the forest. Due to the Forest Strider special rule they have, the forest does not slow them down. And this will end the Wood Elves' turn. Bretonnia turn 3. All units continue moving forward, including the Knights. The units keeping together in this pyramidal 2-3 formation. They will have to navigate around these walls and the ice patch. But that's all Bretonnia can do for their turn. Back to the Wood Elves. Back to the Wood Elves. All units continue moving forward, except for the Deepwood Scouts. The Glade Guard have to wade into the river, that unit getting a little wet, but no harm to them. And then the unit of Dryads continues to march into the next forest, no slowing down from the trees. And then the Wood Elves don't take a magic phase or a shooting phase, so this will end their turn. On the other side, Bretonnia continues moving forward, the peasants marching and the knights moving their normal distance, making their way around all the terrain obstacles. And Bretonnia still cannot shoot, so this will end their turn. Wood Elves turn 5. All units move forward again except for the Deepwood Scouts. But this time none of the units marched. The unit of Dryads are now deeply nested within the forest on the forward right side. Our club rules specify that 4 inches of forest completely hides a unit from the outside of it. And over on the left side, the Glade Guard and the captain have finished crossing the river, back on dry ground. Shooting phase. The Bretonnian bowmen are now within range of the Wood Elves' arrows, so they decide to launch an attack, starting with the Deepwood Scouts. Each of the 10 scouts can shoot twice, but they will suffer from a long-range penalty and a multiple shots penalty. The Deepwood Scouts end up scoring 11 hits on the Bretonnian unit, and then rolling for wounds, 10 of those hits go through as wounds. The peasant bowmen will have to score some ward saves to stay alive, and they score 4 ward saves. So 6 of those bowmen are shot down by the Deepwood Scouts. And now the Glade Guard will get to shoot. And even though the Glade Guard moved this turn, the Wood Elves' archery does not suffer from move and shoot penalties. So the front 2 ranks will also get to shoot multiple shots. But they will also suffer from the multiple shots penalty and the long range penalty. So they let their 20 arrows fly, and they end up hitting with 13 of the arrows. And then rolling for wounds, they score 6 wounds on the bowmen. The bowmen try their ward save one more time to save their lives, and they score 2 ward saves, but that allows 4 wounds to go through, and that eliminates the rest of their unit. The Bretonnian bowmen never had a chance. So the Wood Elves will be the first to score They'll earn the full points for the bowman unit. And no other Bretonnian units are within range, so that will end their shooting phase and the Wood Elves' turn. Bretonnia has no charges to declare. Remaining moves. All Bretonnian units angle towards the left of the battlefield, trying to avoid the deadly arrows of the Wood Elves. The men-at-arms and the questing knights are leading the pack. The Knights of the Realm are following closely behind, and then the Grail Knights are on the inside, coming up on the ice sheet. They are also flirting with danger from the Wood Elves' arrows. But now that their peasant bowmen are all dead, they have no shooting phase, so this will be the end of the Bretonnians' turn. Wood Elves turn 6, and they do not declare any charges. Remaining moves. Over on the right flank and in the forest, the Dryads and the Spellsinger decide to not move. And then the Eternal Guard decide to march forward and ascend the hill, the mysterious hill. And the Bonepile Miniatures Club has put together our own large list of 4d6 mysterious hills. And the Wood Elves rolled on that chart and scored a 12, which is a Hill of Plagues. The special rule for the Hill of Plagues is that any units on any portion of the hill cannot use any saves, armor saves or ward saves. So that's definitely not a good place to be. Over on the left, the shooting units all inched forward, the Deepwood Scouts, the Glade Guard, and the Glade Captain. Magic phase. The Spellsinger is ready to start generating magic. The Winds of Magic generate 8 dice for the power pool and 4 for the dispel pool. In our club rules, an army without a wizard and without magic resistance cannot have a dispel pool. But in this case, the Bretonnians do have the obsidian trinket carried by the general that does give them magic resistance. The Winds of Magic generate the power pool based upon the d6s rolled by the wizard on offense. And if the defending team has a wizard, the dispel pool treats those same dice rolled as if they are d3s instead of d6s. If the defending army has no wizard, but it has magic resistance, then it uses those same dice rolled as d2s instead of d6s. And that is the case with this Bretonnian army, at least for as long as they have the obsidian trinket. So with a power pool of 8 and a dispel pool of 4, the Spellsinger attempts his first spell. His first spell will be the Awakening Wood, which is spell number 1. This spell allows the trees to wake up and attack a nearby enemy unit. This spell casts on a 6. He throws 2 dice at it and scores a 10. The Bretonnians do not try to dispel this one. This spell is very fitting since they are surrounded by trees in the forest, and the trees will attack the nearby unit of the men-at-arms. The spell generates 6 hits on the men-at-arms, and then rolling for wounds, it causes 2 wounds. And then the men-at-arms fail to save those wounds. So 2 men perish from the attacking trees. Next spell. The Spellsinger will attempt spell number 2, which is Flesh to Stone. This is an augment spell that gives the target unit +2 toughness. This one casts on an 8+. The Spellsinger throws 3 dice at it, and this one scores a 9. So it does go off, and the Bretonnians do not attempt to dispel it. And the Wood Elves decide to end their magic turn. Shooting phase. After stepping forward, the Grail Knight Paladins are within range of the Wood Elf shooters. The Knights did not turn sharp enough. First to fire off will be the Deepwood Scouts. They will still be at long range and will have a multiple shots penalty. They fire off their 20 arrows, and they generate 10 hits on the Paladins. And then rolling for wounds, they score 6 wounds on the Paladins. These Knights normally have a 2+ armor save, which is tough to get through, but these Wood Elves have some armor-piercing bonuses. The Wood Elves' Azrai archery gives them +1 armor piercing, and then these Deepwood Scouts have arcane bodkins, which also gives them +1, which gives them a +2 armor piercing bonus. So the Knights ended up scoring 3 armor saves, and then they scored 1 ward save. That allows 2 wounds to go through from the Deepwood Scouts. So that will inflict both wounds available on the Grail Knight musician. He is taken down. And now next to shoot will be the Glade Captain. He is also suffering from the same long range and multiple shots penalties as the Deepwood Scouts. So he fires off 6 shots, and he scores 5 hits. These shooting penalties are not affecting the Wood Elves. Next, the Captain rolls for wounds, and he scores 4 wounds. And then the Paladins try their saves, and they score 2 armor saves. But that allows 2 more final wounds to go through on the Knights. And that will take down the Battle Standard Bearer. A Paladin falls. But the Wood Elves are not through. Next to shoot will be the Glade Guard. Under all the same shooting penalties, they fire off their 20 shots, and they end up scoring 6 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they score 3 wounds. The General must score some saves in order to stay alive. He tries his armor saves and scores 2 of them. And then he scores 0 ward saves. That allows 1 of his wounds to go through. He's got 1 left, but he is still alive. That was a costly mistake for the Paladins to tempt the Wood Elves shooters. The Wood Elves must have brought their Olympic shooting team to this battle. They are annihilating these Bretonnians. And now with the death of the Battle Standard Bearer, who was a hero Paladin, the Bretonnians must roll on the Killed Leader reaction chart. This is a club rule that we have put together that simulates the effect of killed leaders on the rest of the army. All units within 12 inches of a fallen lord or hero must roll on this reaction chart. Or in the case of the fallen general, all units in the army must roll on this chart. But in the case of this Paladin Battle Standard Bearer, just those within 12 inches will roll, starting with the Paladin General. He ends up rolling a 5 on the chart, which gives him hatred for the unit that killed the leader. In this case, it will be the Glade Captain. So the Paladin Knight has hatred for the Glade Captain. And then the Knights of the Realm also had to roll on the reaction chart. They scored a 1, which forced a leadership test that they ended up passing. So no effects come upon them. So that will wrap up the shooting phase for the Wood Elves. They score more points for both the Battle Standard Bearer and the Grail Knight Musician. And since there's no close combat yet, this will end their turn. A very consequential turn for the Bretonnians. Bretonnia's movement phase. There's no time for them to lick their wounds. All units continue pressing the advance to the left side, keeping as far away as they can from the Wood Elves' archery. The questing Knights have overtaken the men-at-arms as the lead unit, heading straight towards the Eternal Guard. The men-at-arms are looking to counter the Dryads deep within the forest ahead of them. And then the rest of the Knights seem to be swinging even wider to the left flank of the men-at-arms. And with no one left in their army to shoot a bow, this will bring the Bretonnians to the end of their turn. Wood Elves turn 7, and they declare the first charge of the game. And that will be the Eternal Guard into the Questing Knights. They don't want to get caught in combat on the Hill of Plagues. And in our club, charge distances are a little shorter than you may be used to. In our club, we roll 2d6 and select only the highest die rolled, and then add that to the normal M value. So the Eternal Guard roll for their charge test, and they pass the test. They make it into combat with the questing knights, but they must take a dangerous terrain test due to the fact that they had to charge over some cliffs from the hill from when they started their charge. So the guard roll for their dangerous terrain test, and they take 1 wound. And the questing knights did elect to hold, so these 2 units will be in combat this round. Remaining moves. The Glade Guard and the Glade Captain inch forward a little bit and wheeling to the right. And then the Deepwood Scouts on the far left marched forward, also wheeling to the right a little bit. And then the Dryads and the Spellsinger in the forest did not move. Magic phase. The Winds of Magic generate 6 dice for the power pool and 3 for the dispel pool, and then a channeling attempt failed. And the Spellsinger will attempt the first spell, Awakening of the Wood, and the target will be the Knights of the Realm, who are now just within range. The Spellsinger rolls 2 dice and it does go off, and then Bretonnia tries to dispel it, and they fail. So then the trees try to attack the Knights. They end up scoring 1 hit, and then that 1 hit goes through as a wound. And then the Knights try to save it with their armor save, and they do save it. So no wounds from that spell on the Knights. But since the spell was successful, the lore attribute Life Bloom comes into effect, and it does raise 1 wound in the nearby Eternal Guard unit. So the elf immediately recovers his wound from the dangerous terrain test from the cliff, and he rejoins the unit. The Eternal Guard are back up to full strength. Shooting phase. The Glade Guard moved forward just enough to be within range of the Knights of the Realm. So with the same shooting penalties of long range and multiple shots, they let 20 arrows fly into the air, and 8 of them end up hitting the unit of Knights. And then rolling for wounds, they score 4 wounds. The Knights of the Realm try their armor save and they score 3, and no ward save, so 1 wound goes through on the unit. Combat phase. Over to the Eternal Guard and the Questing Knights. And remember, the Eternal Guard have poison attacks for this combat, but they won't have use of their shields because their weapon requires 2 hands. And then the Questing Knights will have their great weapons. And due to the Eternal Guard fighting in extra ranks, we counted 21 attacks from their unit. They ended up scoring 12 hits on the Questing Knights. And then they scored 9 wounds, and 4 of them were poison wounds. The Questing Knights try their armor saves, and they score all 5 normal wound saves. And then they score 1 ward save against those poison attacks. So only 3 of the 9 wounds end up going through on the Knights. But with only 6 Knights to start with, that eliminates half of their unit. But now they get to strike back against the Elves. They will have 4 attacks against the Elves, and they ended up missing all of them. But then 1 elf gets kicked and wounded by one of the horses. So only 1 elf is wounded in return. Combat resolution. So the Eternal Guard will easily win this combat. And you can also see that I failed to mention the +2 toughness on the Eternal Guard unit. The Spellsinger did cast the Flesh to Stone spell on the unit during the magic phase, and I forgot to mention that, even though they ended up not needing the spell. And then we will apply a custom club rule which we call Cumulative Leadership, and that's where we grant 1 leadership bonus to the winner of a combat, and then a leadership penalty to the loser of a combat. And so in this case, the Knights will lose a leadership and the Guard will gain a leadership. And these penalties and bonuses will persist throughout the game, up to ±3 of the original model's leadership value. And so now the Questing Knights must take their break test upon this new leadership value. So they roll for their break test, and they fail the test. They will run from the Eternal Guard, and they make it 11 inches away, and the Eternal Guard decide to not pursue them. But as a result, the questing knights will lose their banner, and they also lose the blessing of the lady. But no other units nearby end up panicking. So this brings us to the end of the Wood Elves' turn. Back to Bretonnia. Bretonnia declares their first charge of the game. And this will be the men-at-arms. They will change their target from the Dryads over to the Eternal Guard. And the Elves decide to hold. So the men-at-arms roll for their charge test, and they pass it. But they were only able to square up 4 of the 5 columns, but more like 3.5. And the men-at-arms also passed their dangerous terrain check for the forest. And now for a compulsory move over by the questing knights. Fleeing from the Eternal Guard, they will try to rally. So they roll for their rally test, and they pass it. They turn around to face the battle, but their unit is reduced to 1/3 of their original unit size. Remaining moves. The Knights of the Realm and the Paladin continue moving as fast as they can to the far left flank, seeking to do some damage where the Wood Elves do not have any arrows. Combat phase. The Bretonnian men-at-arms are up against the Wood Elves' Eternal Guard. There are 18 men and 20 elves. And despite the men charging, the elves will have higher initiative and will strike first. Remember that the Eternal Guard have poison attacks for this turn, and they have the Flesh to Stone spell, which gives them +2 toughness. They also have +1 strength when charged, using their Serath weapons, and they can also fight with 3 ranks. So we counted up 18 attacks from the Eternal Guard. They ended up rolling 10 hits on the men, and then they rolled up 9 wounds, and 3 of them were poison wounds. And due to the strength of the Serath weapons, the men's armor have no effect, but they did roll up 1 ward save. But that still allows 8 men to be cut down. And now the men can strike back. They all carry halberds and will get +1 strength with their attacks. So they ended up rolling 9 attacks and scored 2 hits. And then those 2 hits generated 0 wounds, despite the strength bonus. The Flesh to Stone spell proving too tough for those blows. Combat resolution. The Eternal Guard easily win this combat. They will gain a +1 bonus to their leadership, and the men will lose 1. And then the men are forced to take a break test. So they roll for that test, and they pass it. They have enough courage to stick around for another round of combat, giving it another shot. But that will end the combat phase for Bretonnia, and that will end their turn. The Wood Elves open the round with declaring a charge. The Dryads will charge into the flank of the Knights of the Realm, which is in their front arc. The Knights elect to hold, and then the Dryads end up passing their charge test. They make it into the flank of the Knights. And since the Knights have the banner of the Eternal Flame, both units have the Fear special ability. So the fear from both units will cancel each other out. No fear check in either direction. Remaining moves. Over on the left side, all the shooting units decide to inch forward a few inches. That will allow them to shoot again this turn. Shooting phase. First to shoot will be the Deepwood Scouts at the questing knights. They will still have the long range and multiple shots penalties. They fire off 20 shots, and they land 10 hits on the questing knights. And then rolling for wounds, they score 5 wounds. The questing knights try their armor save, and they score only 1. And since they lost the blessing of the lady, they cannot try the ward save. So with 4 wounds, that unit is eliminated, completely destroyed. The Wood Elves will score the full points for the questing knights unit. Next to shoot. The Glade Captain is in range to target the Paladin Knight, and he will have the same shooting penalties as usual. He has 6 shots and fires them off, and 5 of them hit the Paladin, and then rolling for wounds he scores 2. And remember, he has an armor piercing value of 2, and so the Knight rolls for his armor saves and scores none. And then he also scores 0 ward saves. So the Paladin will take both of those wounds, and that is all he has to give. He falls on the battlefield. There is no quarter from the arrows of the Wood Elves. They will score the points for the Paladin Knight, plus the bonus points for taking down the army general. And now the remaining Bretonnian units must roll on the killed leader reaction chart again. Starting with the men-at-arms. They roll on the chart and score a 5, which gives them hatred for the Glade Captain. And then the Knights of the Realm roll, and they score a 2, which forces them to take a leadership test, and they pass it. So no effects come upon them. And that will end the Wood Elves shooting phase, a long phase for the Bretonnians. On to combat, over to the Eternal Guard against the Men-at-Arms. And the Eternal Guard will strike first. They have 18 attacks, and they ended up rolling only 5 hits this time. And then rolling for wounds, they score 2. And then the men are unable to save those wounds, so they will take both. But now they can strike back. The Men-at-Arms have 7 attacks. They ended up rolling 2 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they scored 1 wound. And then the Wood Elves are unable to save that wound. Combat resolution. And the Eternal Guard will win this round of combat. They will gain another leadership bonus, and the Men-at-Arms will take another leadership penalty. And then the men must take a break test. So they roll for that break test, and they fail. They're going to run from the Eternal Guard. So the men are able to flee 7 inches away from the enemy, and then the Eternal Guard choose to pursue, and they roll a 5, which brings them just short of overcoming the men. So the Men-at-Arms will survive for the moment, but they do lose their unit standard, and the Wood Elves will score the points for that. On to the next combat. Now for the Dryads against the Knights of the Realm, with the Dryads having charged into the flank of the Knights of the Realm. And for this combat, I'm going to skip the details because neither side takes a wound from this round of combat. But since the Dryads charged into the flank of the Knights, they will win the combat resolution, and then the Knights had to take a break test, and they passed. So they will continue fighting into the next round, and this will end the combat phase for the Wood Elves and their turn. Bretonnia begins their turn with a compulsory rally test for their Men-at-Arms. They are currently fleeing from the Eternal Guard. So they roll for that test, and they fail the test. They will continue to flee away from battle, but they will have a long ways to go before they escape the battlefield. And for remaining moves, the Knights of the Realm were able to pull off a combat reform against the Dryads, so they are no longer fighting on their flank. Combat phase, and we'll stay right here with the Dryads and the Knights of the Realm. And in the last round of combat, no wounds were taken on either side. We'll see how this round goes. First to strike will be the Dryads, and they change into their Birch aspect, which gives them the +1 attack special ability. So we counted 20 attacks from the Dryads. So they roll for their hits and score 12 hits on the Knights. And then they roll for wounds and score 7. And then the Knights try their armor save, and they score 6 saves. But then they score 0 ward saves. So 1 Knight falls from that attack. But now they can strike back. We counted 11 attacks from the Knights. They roll and score 3 hits, and then 2 of those go through as wounds. So 2 wounds go through on the Dryads, but since the attacks are flaming attacks, due to the banner of the Eternal Flame, the unit will actually take 4 wounds, coming from the Knights. And then the Dryads score 1 ward save. So 3 final wounds go through. But next the horses will get to attack, but they ended up scoring 0 hits. And then last but not least, the Spellsinger also tried to attack, but he also had 0 hits. Combat resolution. And the Knights of the Realm will win this round of combat. The Knights will gain 1 leadership, and then the Dryads will lose 1, which brings both units back to their original values. And then the Dryads are immune to psychology, so they don't have to take a break test. So that will end this round of combat. Back to the Wood Elves. The Wood Elves, with the men-at-arms fleeing straight ahead of the Eternal Guard, decide not to charge into the fleers. Instead, the Eternal Guard decide to wheel towards the battle with the Knights and the Dryads, intending to reinforce the Dryads as soon as possible. And then the Wood Elves shooting units decide not to move at all. Shooting phase. The men-at-arms are within range of the Glade Guard. With the same shooting penalties as before, they launch their arrows, and they end up scoring 16 hits on the men. And then rolling for wounds, they score 9 wounds on the men, and that is more than they have to give. They are wiped out. Shooting penalties have been no factor for these Wood Elves during this game. They are repulsing everything. The Knights of the Realm are the only Bretonnian unit remaining on the battlefield. Now over to combat to see how that continues. For this round of combat, the Dryads shapeshift into their Willow aspect, which gives the Knights a -1 to hit penalty against the Dryads. The Dryads will strike first. They throw 15 attacks at the Knights, and they end up scoring 11 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they score 5 wounds on the Knights. And then the Knights end up scoring 4 armor saves and 1 ward save, effectively blocking all of those wounds. And now the Knights can strike back. They throw 11 attacks at the Dryads. They end up scoring 4 hits on them. And then rolling for wounds, they score 0. No wounds go through. Very unexpected. Next, the Spellsinger can attack, but he ends up missing his. And then next will be the War Horses. They end up dividing their attacks among the Dryads and the Spellsinger. They ended up scoring 1 hit on the Spellsinger, and then that hit does go through as a wound, and the Spellsinger is unable to save it. So that character takes his first wound, and it is the only wound exchanged between the units during this round of battle. Combat resolution. And the Knights end up winning combat once again. They will take another leadership bonus, and the Dryads will take another penalty. But then the Dryads once again don't have to take a break test. This combat will continue into the next round. And that will end the combat phase for the Wood Elves. Back to Bretonnia. Bretonnia's turn 9, and we'll go straight back into combat with the Knights of the Realm against the Dryads. And this time the Dryads shapeshift into their Oak aspect, which gives them a +1 toughness. So the Dryads launch their 20 attacks, and they end up hitting with 15. And then rolling for wounds, they score 9 wounds on the Knights. And then the Knights try their tough armor save, and they score 7. But then they score 0 ward saves. So 2 final wounds go through on the Knights. But now the Knights can strike back. They end up throwing 9 attacks at the Dryads. And then due to their flammable attacks, they end up hitting with 4 and then wounding with 4. and then the Dryads are unable to save any of those wounds. So 4 wounds go through from the Knights, and then the war horses tack on 1 more wound on the Dryads, for a total of 5. And then once again the Spellsinger comes up with nothing from his attacks. Combat resolution. And once again, the Knights of the Realm will be the victors of this combat round. They will take a leadership bonus, and the Dryads will take a leadership penalty. And again, there will be no break test necessary for the Dryads. The Knights of the Realm, having a lot of momentum in combat, but this will end their turn, will go back to the Wood Elves. And the Wood Elves don't declare any charges this turn. Remaining moves. The Eternal Guard begin to wheel around to the flank of the Knights of the Realm, only a few inches away. And then the shooting units do not move this turn. Combat phase. And we'll continue with the Dryads and the Knights. And the Dryads will change into their Willow aspect, which gives them a -1 to hit bonus. But the Dryads will strike first. They start with their 15 attacks and they end up rolling 11 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they score 5 wounds. The Knights have their armor save and they score 4 of them, but then 0 ward saves. So 1 wound goes through on the Knights. Next to strike will be the Spellsinger, and he misses his attacks. And now the Knights can strike back. They have 8 attacks this time, and they end up with 4 hits. And then they score 1 wound. And then the Dryads try their ward save and fail. So due to the flammable attacks, 2 Dryads take wounds from this exchange. But then the war horses sneak in 1 more wound, but the Dryads are able to save that one with their ward save. Combat resolution. And the Knights will win combat once again. Leadership penalties and bonuses will be dealt out accordingly, and then once again the Dryads don't have to take a break test. This combat will continue into the next round. And Bretonnia will go straight back into their combat phase. The Knights against the Dryads. And we are down to 7 Knights and 6 Dryads, which includes the Wizard, and he has 1 wound left. First to strike will be the Dryads, and this time they have taken their Oak aspect, and that gives them a toughness bonus of +1. So the Dryads throw their attacks at the Knights, and they score 9 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they score 2 wounds. And then the Knights are able to save 1 of those with their armor save. But that allows 1 Knight to fall. The Knights will strike next. So the Knights throw their attacks and they end up scoring only 1 hit on the Dryads. And then that hit causes 1 wound. But due to their flammable special rule, it will cause 2 wounds on the unit, and the Dryads are unable to save either one. So the Dryads will take 2 wounds. And then the war horses get to attack, and they split their attacks between the Dryads and the Spellsinger. And nothing significant happens with the attacks on the Dryads unit, but when they attacked the Spellsinger, 2 hits got through, and then rolling for wounds, they scored 1 wound. And then the Spellsinger was unable to save that with his ward save, so he takes his final wound of the game, and he falls. Combat resolution. And the Knights will win this round of combat once again. But both sides are already maxed out with leadership penalties and bonuses. And once again, the Dryads do not have to take a break test. And Bretonnia will take the points for killing the Spellsinger, which erases their goose egg finally from the scoreboard. And then it will be the Wood Elves' turn to roll on the killed leader reaction chart for all the remaining units. So the Dryads will roll first, and they ended up scoring a 5. And that would give them hatred, but they already have hatred, so that does not affect them. Next to roll will be the Eternal Guard. They ended up scoring a 2, which forces a leadership test on them, and they passed it. So no effects on them either. And all the other units in the game are too far away from the Spellsinger to roll on the chart. So this will bring an end to the Bretonnians' combat phase, and we'll go back to the Wood Elves. And the Wood Elves will begin this round with a charge. The Eternal Guard into the flank of the Knights. And this one is so close that they won't be able to fail this one, so they will make it in, and the Knights have to accept the charge. And this will end the Wood Elves' movement phase. They no longer have a magic phase, and they decide to skip their shooting phase, and will go straight into combat with these units. So the Knights are still fighting 3 Dryads in their front, and then the Eternal Guard will be on their flank. First to strike will be the Eternal Guard. Due to base contact rules, we counted 10 attacks from the Eternal Guard into the Knights. So the Eternal Guard ended up scoring 4 hits on the Knights, and then rolling for wounds, they scored only 1. But that 1 wound was a poison wound, and the Knights were unable to save it. So 1 Knight falls. Next to strike will be the Dryads, and we counted up 7 attacks from the Dryads. They ended up scoring 3 hits, but then 0 wounds. The Knights got lucky in this round, and now they can strike back. We counted 4 attacks from them, and they put them all into the Dryads. The Knights ended up scoring 2 hits on the Dryads, and then only 1 wound. But it does cause a double wound on the unit, and the Dryads were unable to save any. So 2 Dryads fall, and there's 1 remaining. And then last but not least, the Bretonnian war horses will attack the last Dryad with 2 horses. They manage to score 1 hit on the Dryad, and then that 1 hit does go through as a wound, and the Dryad is unable to save the wound. So the Knights of the Realm are finally able to finish off the Dryad's unit completely. Combat resolution. So this round of combat came out to a draw, 4 points on each side. So no leadership values will be adjusted, and no break test is necessary. This combat will continue into the next round, but Bretonnia will gladly take the points for finally finishing off the Dryad's unit. And this will end the Wood Elves' combat phase and their turn. And Bretonnia will start their round with a leadership test, trying to make a combat reform. They roll for that test and they pass it. So they reform to face the Eternal Guard. And now we'll go straight back into combat. And Bretonnia is down to 5 Knights of the Realm against 18 Eternal Guard. And the Eternal Guard will strike first, and they will have 21 attacks into the Knights. They ended up scoring 12 hits on the Knights, and then rolling for wounds, they scored 6 wounds. And 2 of those wounds were poison wounds. So Bretonnia tries their armor saves first, and they ended up scoring all 4 for their normal wounds. And then they try their ward saves on their poison wounds, and they scored 1. So after all that, only 1 wound goes through on the Knights. And now the Knights can strike back. They throw all their attacks into the Elves, and they score 2 hits. And then both hits go through as wounds. And then the Elves try to save those wounds. They score 1 armor save, and then 1 ward save. So they're able to save both wounds from the Knights. And then the ponies miss all of their attacks. So no Elves fall in this round of combat. Combat resolution. So the Eternal Guard will win this round of combat. The Knights of the Realm will lose 1 leadership, and the Eternal Guard will gain 1 more. And then the Knights have to take a break test, which they pass. So this combat will continue into the next round. Now we've come to the last round of the game, and the Wood Elves will go straight back into their combat phase, not wasting any time. So the Eternal Guard will throw all their attacks at the remaining 4 Knights of the Realm. And once again they roll for 21 attacks, and this time they scored 15 hits. And then rolling for wounds, they scored 10 wounds. 5 of them normal and 5 of them are poison wounds. And then the Knights try their saves, and they scored 3 armor saves and 0 ward saves. So the poison attacks alone are enough to kill off the rest of the Knights. The Knights were simply outnumbered by the Elves. So the Knights are finally wiped out, and the Bretonnians have nothing left to throw at the Elves. And that brings an end to the entire Bretonnian army. And the Wood Elves lost only 1 unit in the entire battle. A decisive victory. But now let's go to the final scoring. The Wood Elves earn full points for destroying the entire Bretonnian army. That gives them 1,005 points. In addition, they scored the bonus points for capturing 3 unit standards. Also, they captured the battle standard bearer, and they also killed the army general. That brings them to a grand total of 1,280 points. And that is the highest score earned so far in the tournament. And now over to Bretonnia's score. They eliminated the unit of Dryads, and also took down the Spellsinger. And that is all the points that they were able to score. That brings their grand total to 295 points. That gives the Wood Elves a win with a spread of 985 points. Now let's look at the standings in the tournament. Now all teams have fought in 3 battles, and the Wood Elves jump to the top of the pack. They remain the only undefeated team with 3 wins and 0 losses. They have a point total of 3,431 points. They will play again in Game 11 against the Dwarfs. And then the Bretonnians continue at the bottom of the standings. They have 0 wins and 3 losses. Their point total is 1,310 points. We will see the Bretonnians again in Game 10 against the Dark Elves, which is the next game coming up. Each team only has 2 games left to play until the final tournament begins. And now we would like to announce the Bonepile Miniatures MVP of the Game Award. And in a game where every unit pulled their weight, this was a tough decision. But ultimately the MVP award will go to the Eternal Guard. The Eternal Guard dominated close combat like usual. They went up against 3 different Bretonnian units, starting with the Questing Knights, causing them to flee. And then they were immediately attacked by the Men-at-Arms. After a couple rounds of close combat, they also had to flee from the Elves. And then the Eternal Guard made it over to the flank to help the Dryads with the Knights of the Realm. The Knights only survived a few rounds of combat before they were wiped out. The Eternal Guard were responsible for inflicting a total of 19 wounds on the Bretonnians. And then as an honorable mention, on the Bretonnian side, the Knights of the Realm are the only unit that had an effect in the battle. Carrying the flaming banner, they took on the Dryads and the Spellsinger. They steadily slashed and burned that unit down to smoldering twigs. And then they went up against the Eternal Guard. They fought with courage but with no avail, and they finally met their demise. The Knights were responsible for inflicting 17 wounds on the Wood Elves. And now let's look at some essential game stats, starting with Bretonnia. Charges. Only 1 charge. Shooting. Big goose egg here. And close combat. and combat resolution. Now let's look at the Wood Elves. Charges. Magic with spells cast and spell wounds. Shooting. Close combat. And combat resolution. And that will conclude this battle report. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to be notified when the next battle report drops, you may subscribe to this channel. You may check out additional content on this channel and our hobby blog, which is bonepileminiatures.com. You may find more battle reports like this one, plus army showcases and discussions, army backstories, terrain projects, and all kinds of information on house rules and rule supplements. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the discussion area below. And we hope to see you on the next one. Until then.